Okay, our next chapters in our Read Aloud Wayside School is Falling Down. Chapter 20, 21, and 22. Eric, and Eric. Mr. Kidswater's voice crackled over the loudspeaker. Mrs. Jules, send Eric to my office at once. He sounded mad. Mrs. Jules was confused. When did we get a loudspeaker? She asked. Oh, Louis put it in yesterday, said Jenny. Mrs. Jules was still confused. There was 3 Erics in her class. She didn't know which one Mr. Kidswater meant. Eric Fry was fat, but not short. Eric Bacon was short, but not fat. And Eric Evans was short and fat. Mrs. Jules chose the biggest Eric. Eric Fry, Mr. Kidswater wants to see you. Eric Fry trembled as he slowly stood up. The other 2 Erics smiled. The principal's office was on the first floor. It's not fair, Eric thought as he headed down to his doom. Anytime Eric does something wrong, I'm the one who gets in trouble. He stood in front of the principal's door. His heart beat very fast. He took a couple of breaths, then knocked lightly. Enter, boomed Mr. Kidswater. Eric turned the doorknob. He took one step inside, then stood with his back against the wall, as far away from Mr. Kidswater as he could get. Mr. Kidswater sat behind an enormous desk. He wore mirrored sunglasses so Eric couldn't tell where he was looking. Sit down, Eric, he said. Eric moved to the small metal chair in front of the desk. A bare light bulb hung over his head. Mr. Kidswater cracked his knuckles. We can do this the easy way, or we can do this the hard way, he said. It's your choice. I don't know what you're talking about, said Eric. I didn't do anything. So it's the hard way, is it? Asked Mr. Kidswater. Very well. You'll talk one way or another. You'll tell me everything I want to know. But Mr. Kidswater pounded his fist on the desk. When was the last time you sharpened your pencil? Eric tried to remember, but he was too nervous to think. Wait, let me think, he stammered. We had a spelling test on Friday, but I borrowed. Where were you yesterday afternoon at 12:15? Asked Mr. Kidswater. Yesterday? Asked Eric. I was here at Wayside School. I remember a lunch and then I played kickball. Mr. Kidswater smiled. Do you kick with your left foot? He asked. No, I'm right-footed, said Eric Fry. Hm, grumbled Mr. Kidswater. Have you ever gotten your hair cut at Charlie's barber shop? Yes, said Eric, 2 weeks ago. Aha, said Mr. Kidswater, so you admit it. Do you know what a mugworm gurlup is? Grublick is? Eric Fry turned pale. No, please, he begged. I didn't do it. I'm innocent. You got the wrong Eric. There's 2 other Erics in my class. Mr. Kidswater scowled. So that's what you're going to play, is it? Well, that's fine with me. I've got all the time in the world. He flicked on the microphone. Mrs. Jules, send me another Eric. 29 floors above them, Mrs. Jules looked at the 2 remaining Erics. Okay, Eric Evans, she said. Eric Evans shivered, his eyes filled with tears. Why me? He asked himself over and over again as he walked down the stairs. It's my parents' fault. Why did they have to name me Eric? Why couldn't they name me Osgood? He tapped on the door to the principal's office. Come in, bellowed Mr. Kidswater. Eric Evans gulped, then walked inside. He sat in a little chair in front of Mr. Kidswater's enormous desk. Eric Fry was nowhere to be seen. Oh, what happened to Eric Fry? He asked. I'll ask the questions, barked Mr. Kidswater. But don't worry, Eric, he said gently. You have nothing to fear, as long as you tell me the truth. He cracked his knuckles. Eric Evans was very scared. Mrs. Jules always said that there was more than one answer to every question. He hoped he gave Mr. Kidswater the right one. Do you did you have a spelling test last Friday? Mr. Kidswater asked. Yes, said Eric Evans. How did you know that? I have my ways, Mr. Kidswater said slyly, behind his mirrored glasses. When was the last time you sharpened your pencil? This morning, said Eric Evans. Mauricia accidentally stepped on it and did you play kickball yesterday at 12:15? No, I played tetherball. Right or left-handed? Right. Mr. Kidswater tossed a stapler at him. Eric caught it with his right hand. Mr. Kidswater scowled. Okay, Eric, tell me this. Have you ever gotten your hair cut at Charlie's barber shop? No, but I will. I'll go right now if you want me to. Oh, you're not going anywhere, shouted Mr. Kidswater. Have you ever heard of Mugworm Grublick? He said. Eric Evans screamed. Upstairs, Mrs. Jules heard Mr. Kidswater's voice resounded over the loudspeaker. Mrs. Jules, send me the last Eric. On my way, said Eric Bacon. He hopped out of his chair and bounced down the stairs. He didn't bother knocking on Mr. Kidswater's door. He just walked in. What can I do for you? He asked. There was no sign of Eric Evans. Have a seat, said Mr. Kidswater. I just want to ask you a few questions. Sure thing, said Eric Bacon. He sat in the little chair. He leaned back with his hands behind his head and his feet up on Mr. Kidswater's desk. He looked at himself in Mr. Kidswater's mirrored glasses, took out a comb out of his back pocket and combed his hair. His hair was very neat and trim. He had gotten it cut yesterday at 12:15 at Charlie's barber shop. Mr. Kidswater cracked his knuckles. When's the last time you sharpened your pencil? He asked. November 18th, Eric Bacon answered right away. It was 3 minutes before 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I remember because my watch stopped. Where were you yesterday at 12:15? Mr. Kidswater asked. I was in the garden having tea. Did Mauricia step on somebody's pencil this morning? Asked Mr. Kidswater. Yes. Whose? She stepped on everybody's pencil, said Eric Bacon. Are you left-handed or right-footed? Demanded Mr. Kidswater. I write with my left foot and kick with my right hand, replied Eric Bacon. Mr. Kidswater scowled. Have you ever gotten your hair cut at Charlie's barber shop? No, I never get my hair cut, said Eric Bacon. I'm bald. This is a wig. Mr. Kidswater took off his glasses and glared at him. Do the words mugworm grublick mean anything to you? Eric Bacon shook his head. I can look it up in a dictionary if you want. Mr. Kidswater shook his head. I tried that, he said. It's not there. He rubbed his chin. Okay, boys, you can come out now. Eric Evans and Eric Fry crawled out from under the desk. Mr. Kidswater looked at each of the Erics. One of you is lying, he said. I don't know who it is, but I'll find out, and when I do, whoever it is will be very sorry. Now I'll give you one chance to come clean. Eric Fry trembled. Eric Evans shivered. Come on, let's blow this popsicle stand, said Eric Bacon, and he walked out of the room. The other two Erics followed. Mr. Kidswater rubbed the back of his neck. He looked at the white card on top of his desk, the one that said Charlie's Barber Shop. Under that, in blue ink, it said, Eric, Tuesday, 12:15. He turned the card over, and on the other side, a left-handed person had written with a sharp pencil, Mr. Kidswater is a mugworm grublick. Chapter 23, Teeth. Something terrible happened. Rondi grew two new front teeth. Rondi was afraid nobody would think she was cute anymore. Mrs. Jules was giving a health lesson. Always brush your teeth, she said, and remember to scrub behind your ears. But I'll get toothpaste in my ears, exclaimed Todd. Everybody laughed. Everybody except Rondi. She didn't want anybody to see her teeth. She hadn't smiled for a week. Mrs. Jules made Todd write his name on the board under the word discipline. At recess, Rondi decided to tell Louis her problem. Louis was talking to Dee Dee. Do you have any green balls left? Asked Dee Dee. I'm sorry, I've already given them all away, said Louis. Well, that's not fair, said Dee Dee. Why don't you ever save one for me? You know I can't do that, said Louis. If I save a ball for you, then all the other kids will want me to save balls for them too. Thanks for nothing, Louis, said Dee Dee as she stormed away. It was Rondi's turn. She made sure nobody else was listening. Louis, will you help me? She whispered. Sure, Rondi. What's the problem? Asked Louis. Rondi smiled, showing Louis her teeth. Very nice, said Louis. Listen to this, said Rondi. Seashells by the seashore. Oh, that was good, said Louis. No, it isn't, complained Rondi. I used to whistle when I said the words with S's in them. Now nobody will think I'm cute. Well, I think you're cute, said Louis. You don't count, said Rondi. Well, thanks a lot, said Louis. I didn't mean it bad, said Rondi. You think everybody's cute, even Miss Mush. That's why I like you. Oh, well, thank you, Rondi. I like you too. Thank you, said Rondi. Will you please kick me in my teeth? What? No, said Louis. Why not? Said Rondi. You said you liked me, and if you liked me, you'd kick me in the teeth. You know I can't, said Louis. If I kick you in the teeth, then all the other kids will want me to kick them in the teeth too. Rondi scowled. Well, thanks for nothing, Louis, she said. She crawled into the bushes where nobody would be able to see her mouth. Louis, Louis, shouted Stephen and Jason as they ran towards him. Louis, Terrence stole our ball, said Jason. I wish you children would learn to share, said Louis. Make him give it back, said Stephen. Louis started to say something, then he stopped. He twirled his multicolored mustache. Hey, Rondi, he called, will you help me? Rondi crawled out from the bushes. You wouldn't help me. Why should I help you? She said. Terrence stole their ball, said Louis. Make him give it back. Her? Said Stephen and Jason. Me? Said Rondi. Louis winked at her. Rondi's eyes lit up. Okay, Louis, she said. That's a good idea. That's a wonderful idea. She hurried across the playground. Stephen and Jason ran after her. Terrence kicked a red ball up into the air and then ran under it and caught it. Hey, Terrence, said Rondi, that's not your ball. You stole it. Drop dead, ketchup head, said Terrence. Rondi walked up to him, stared him in the eye, and said, In your hat, muskrat. That surprised Terrence. He took a step back, then he collected himself and said, Dig a hole, Millie Mole. Rondi took another step toward him. Kiss a goose, Dr. Seuss, she replied. Terrence looked around. A group of kids had started to form a circle around them. Oh, yeah? Go to jail, garbage pail, he said. Rondi held her ground. Go to the zoo, Mr. Magoo, she retorted. Everyone was very impressed at how brave Rondi was. Now give me back the ball, she demanded. You want it? Asked Terrence. I'll give it to you all right. He raised his fist in the air. Good, let me have it, said Rondi. She smiled, showing him her two new teeth. Terence shook his fist at her. You're asking for it, he said. That's right, said Rondi. I am. Her teeth gleamed at him. Terence brought his fist way back behind him, and Rondi closed her eyes. Hey, look, exclaimed Bibi. Rondi's got new teeth. They're cute, said Ginny. Rondi opened her eyes. You think so? She asked. No, you were cuter before, said Paul. I think she's cuter now, said Todd. They took a vote. 12 kids thought she looked cuter with her two new teeth, and 12 thought she looked cuter before. 3 thought she should keep just one tooth. So Rondi decided to keep her teeth. They were good for biting carrots. Uh-oh, she suddenly remembered, and she ducked just in time. Thanks for joining me.